to what extent can an industry actually ensure that other sections of the economy grow by virtue of participating in higher value activities instead of just exporting the raw minerals?
Africa sits on some of the world's most valuable mineral resources, but extraction alone has never been enough to drive lasting development. Today, the real question is how the continent moves from extraction to innovation, from shipping raw materials to building diversified economies anchored in processing, manufacturing, and tech-driven value chains. To unpack what that shift looks like in practice and what it will take to make it bankable, scalable, as well as globally competitive, we're joined by Dion Shango. Dion, thank you so much for your time. So you are going to be participating in a panel, and I'm going to read the title of what the panel is going to focus on. That's Downstream Buyers program. And obviously, it's looking at extraction to innovation. If we had to think about extraction to innovation in practice, what does that look like from your perspective?
For me, it's really about beneficiation, contributing so much more to the GDP of many of the countries on the continent which are so well endowed with minerals. It really talks about the ability of a country to attract investment in beneficiation in a way that will help it drive many more of its developmental goals. Here I'm talking about infrastructure development. To what extent can an industry actually ensure that other sections of the economy grow by virtue of participating in higher value activities instead of just exporting the raw minerals? When you look at countries across the continent, we've probably been talking about beneficiation for 30 years plus. But when you measure the progress made, it's probably limited. And so we need to start seeing economies grow in a much more diversified way. We need to start seeing supply chains that are involved in getting the final product to market start being a lot more local, a lot more in-country. We need to start seeing better partnerships between governments and private players on a 50-50 basis in a way that will improve basic needs such as electricity, water, roads, rail, and other types of infrastructure. That is how leveraging this mineral endowment can actually look good on the continent.
Are you seeing that though? As you say these, as this list, grows, are you confident that what you're mentioning, I'm seeing it with different countries, and which countries would those be?
So we do see it, but it's limited, and there's so much more scope for improvement. For instance, when you see a mine in West Africa today still running on diesel power, clearly that is an opportunity missed, right? We don't want to be in a situation where we look back 20 years from now and say, here we go again. Africa has been mined for renewable energy, just like it was mined for the Industrial Revolution, but without any of the benefits having been felt by the continent. So there's opportunities. I think when you look at something like the Zambia and DRC copper belt, there's significant opportunity there for a real corridor that can significantly grow the economy in that region. Zimbabwe with lithium, very similar. If you move further south, the Namibia Northern Cape hub for energy and base metals processing, again, present opportunities, if properly leveraged and captured, that can transform the societies of those particular regions. So the opportunity is there, and we've seen also with Rio Tinto's project in Guinea, where they had to build a 600-kilometer railway in order to export the product. The impact that that has not only on the country, but surrounding countries as well. That is the opportunity that these private-public partnerships present.
If you had to pick perhaps, let's say, 3 policy impact or regulatory impacts that African governments could embark on, which would they be? Say in the next 12 to 24 months, which would be the 3 high impact ones?
So firstly, I would pick on energy, right? If we are to have serious investors coming in and beneficiating in the country, they need stable, reliable electricity supply. Secondly, customs. Innovation is needed here in that you could allow industrial equipment to be imported duty-free in a way that actually incentivizes people to come in and build plants and infrastructure in country. Then also things like royalties associated with either mining or beneficiation itself is something that needs to be applied with fairness and transparency in a way that can give an investor with a 15 to 20-year investment horizon certainty and predictability, knowing that the investment is safe.
Going back to the topic of your panel discussion, which obviously focuses on the downstream side of things, when you have to think about downstream buyers in terms of what they need, what do you believe they need to put on the table, and then how does the mining industry come to the picture to sort of meet them halfway so it's a win-win for both sides?
So certainly the issue that many governments grapple with is the one of financing. How do you sustainably create a beneficiation opportunity in country? Well, if we are to be really practical, things like secure offtake agreements over a long term in a way that ensures that there will be a business and revenue stream for the product that is produced is certainly helpful. And I can take that even further, Anastasia, and say, what about some prepayment arrangements that actually provide that capital upfront in order to get operations kickstarted? Providers of capital would also appreciate collaboration with DFI organizations to ensure that there is somebody who perhaps is willing to take the first loss guarantee and therefore giving them much more confidence in their particular investment. And again, just the knowledge of knowing that all policies and regulations will be applied on an efficient, on a transparent and a fair basis over the long term, and that there are no surprises at all that could in any way cause risk to their particular investment. That is how they would want to de-risk their actual investment in a particular country.
Over the past few years, we've been talking about public-private partnerships, whether it's in South Africa or on the continent. As you look at that conversation evolve, in what ways do you find that conversation encouraging for you, and where could we improve when it comes to those public-private partnerships?
Yeah. So for private-public partnerships to succeed, you really need discipline, you need focus, and you need consistency. I've heard many in the industry advocating for governments to actually take an minority equity interest in a particular mining operation or beneficiation operation. These have worked with mixed results. We have seen some governments insisting that their minority equity interests need to be at free carry. Some governments are reasonable enough to say, yes, they must be at fair value. Either way, we have seen some examples of government minority equity interests actually causing delays and frustration in investment. So these are incredibly difficult relationships to manage real time. And so you really need a good alignment of values and interests between a private player and a public player in that sense. What I believe is a much more practical and easier way of executing such a partnership is to really invest on a 50-50 basis with regards to infrastructure development. Again, transport, water, energy, schools, healthcare. When government and a private player come to the party and invest on a 50-50 basis, there's shared equity, shared interest in a way that on a much quicker basis, will be able to result in the transformative impact in society of actually having mining and beneficiation investment in a particular country.
I want to bring in the conversation around critical minerals, because oftentimes when we talk about it, we say that Africa might miss the opportunity to get on board if we don't deal with certain aspects, and then we talk about the different risks that come with that. Can we still be part of that conversation with our voices being heard around critical minerals while we still try and fix these issues that you and I have just spoken about? Or is it a case of fix the issues, then let's have the conversation around critical minerals? How do we balance that?
It's a little bit, Anastasia, like fixing the plane while it is mid-flight. We cannot afford to wait. We probably right now have a limited window of about 3 to 5 years to get our act together. You are absolutely correct. We cannot afford to miss this current mineral boom like what countries like South Africa missed about 10, 15 years ago. And we simply need to get our act together. We need to be consistent with our policies and our regulations. We need to make sure that we are seen as fair and transparent. If we don't do that, my fear is supply chains will be locked elsewhere in the world in a way that will make it very difficult for investors to leave other parts of the world and come back to Africa between 3 to 5 years from now. And so this is a critical discussion that needs to happen now, and we need to see much more actions from governments across the continent right now.
Managing expectations is always important as much as we want to be ambitious with our goals. What's a realistic win for the continent, like if you had to think about it?
A realistic win for me would be to see economies beginning to grow by virtue of new investment, capital being allocated to Africa in ways that it hasn't been before. A critical win for us would be if and when a mining industry is in decline, does the rest of the economy still continue to grow steadily to actually evidence the transformative impact that the mining investment of years gone by has had on a particular country? For me, that is one of the litmus tests that we should use to see whether a particular country has driven its mining and beneficiation investment in the most effective way or not.
Thank you, Dion. For more insights, you can go to miningindaba.com.